Hey everyone, it's Yash Chaudhary with the Turn on Engagement podcast. And today we've got Kathy Kennedy, Director of Internal Communications at Liberty Mutual Insurance on the show. As one of the largest global insurance companies in the world and over tens of thousands of employees, Kathy's going to talk to us about how they weathered the COVID-19 crisis, some interesting things they learned about their workforce, and how their management overcame challenges through some really great initiatives and interesting techniques that will now be a solid part of their future moving forward. She also gives some insights into what a new back to workplace setting might look like for the fall. It's all coming up here next on the Turn on Engagement podcast. Hey everybody, it's Yash Chaudhary with the Turn on Engagement podcast. And today I have a very special guest, Kathy Kennedy, who is the Director of Internal Communications at Liberty Mutual Insurance here in hot but beautiful Boston, Massachusetts. So welcome to the podcast, Kathy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Appreciate you reaching out and inviting me to join.
Awesome. Looking forward to chatting with you here really quickly. We've got a lot of different things that we can talk about. I think one of the big burning topics that a lot of our audience really loves to hear about, particularly with the stories that come out of it for different companies, different industries, is how you've addressed employee engagement during COVID-19, your employee communications. How have you kept the flow of that communications going to your workforce? Tell us the story. I know everybody starts off with kind of last year and then kind of takes us through it, but what was that like? What was the experience and how has it impacted you?
It was fast and furious. I can remember, as things, sorry.
To say the least, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. As things began escalating, back in, it's hard to remember, but it was January of 2020. And, it was still very distant to us here in the US, but we have operations around the world. So we were hearing as things were progressing, as the pandemic was progressing through other countries. And then we really began our communications here in the US, I believe it was in February when the travel ban started for our US employees. And then things slowly creeped in over the West Coast and we started just closing offices kind of one by one, starting up in Washington and then Oregon and California. And then eventually March 16th was the day that we announced, okay, everybody in the US mandatory work from home. And if at that point, a lot of people were at home. But for those people that were still in the office, it was like saying goodbye to your friends at the end of the school year when you're not going to see them all summer. So it was kind of a sad day, but we all went home. So then our technology organization sprung into action to make sure that we could support our workforce of over 40,000 employees globally. So everybody was set up with the technology they needed to stay connected and do their job and service our customers. And then as communicators, we had to quickly convene and figure out, okay, how are we going to keep our people informed of what's happening? So we were at that point engaged with daily calls with our enterprise safety and business continuity teams, public affairs, our diversity, equity, inclusion teams, employee relations, legal, all the people that need to be at the table as key decisions are made. So, in terms of when we'd be updating policies and timelines and things like that, and just really keeping updated on the evolving pandemic. So from those calls, then we created, there's a sub-communications team. So then we could take what we knew we needed to let employees know and figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to, keep our employees informed in this environment that we're in now, where we're all working from home? So one of the first things we did was to stand up within our intranet, we stood up a sub-site within our intranet, which we called our COVID-19 site pages, whatever we want to call it, mini site, where we were able to we'd put all of our updates there. So that's where we would continue to drive people to for the information they needed. We knew that people needed to hear from their leaders. So we coordinated frequent and transparent leadership communications across the enterprise to keep employees informed. And, part of this involved partnering with multiple functions across the company to make sure that we were keeping employees aware of any policies and resources created to support them through this, whether it be their physical, financial, or mental health and well-being. Part of that was also creating new channels and tactics to engage our employees globally, because we knew that, just having a central website wasn't the end all be all, because we have employees around the world and they access things in different ways. We knew that the leaders would play a big role in the communication. So that was a big part of our strategy, was having the communications, because we know that employees will listen to information when their managers share it with them. So that was kind of one of the key drivers of our strategy. We also, one thing I should say, I should have said this up front, is at Liberty, our values are foundational for how we treat each other, our customers, our communities. And we have 5 values, which are to be open, keep it simple, put people first, make things better, and act responsibly. So anytime, any decision we made, any communication we wrote, anything that we were doing would ladder up to our values.
That's fantastic. I love hearing about the values. So obviously, with a company your size, 40,000 employees, so values, having that mission, vision, values, and that culture is an integral part of it. I also really love to hear that, leadership played a big role and stepped up to the plate, because leadership communications in a time of crisis is the most important thing when it comes top down. I'm curious, how did you get feedback from employees on things? Was there anything bottom up where you considered, the needs or the ideas or things coming from the employees? Like, was there any groundswell?
We did. We actually began surveying our employees pretty quickly when the pandemic hit, when we went into work from home, because we knew that we wanted to make sure that the way we were responding made them feel safe, that they knew that we were putting their needs first and that they could trust us. So we created ongoing pulse surveys throughout the pandemic. We've slowed them down now, and they've spun a little bit now, because now it's more about, what are you thinking about in terms of coming back to the office? But that was really the way we were gauging throughout the course of 2020. And our response rates were amazing. Employees were being very open and honest with how they were feeling about the way we were responding, the resources we were providing, how it made them feel to be hearing from their leaders on a regular basis, and then also their feedback on some of the, once we got past sort of standing up the web pages and standing up the cadence of when leaders would communicate and all the health and well-being resources, then we took a step to think about, okay, now we've got all that in place. How can we do, what are the engaging and fun things we can do with employees now that we're in this virtual setting? And at that point, we knew that we would be for a while. So
right.
we looked for creative ways to, aside from just the very tactical communications, like how can we really, make people feel inspired, engaged, and have some fun? So one of the first things we did was our version. I don't know if you remember John Krasinski's Some Good News. We created our own version, Some Good Liberty News.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was really well received. We actually asked employees to submit their own stories of how they were engaging with each other through. They were doing virtual competitions. People were giving back in their communities, celebrating their heritage. Some groups were doing, really amazing things like virtual songs and dances and like talent shows and things like that. So we were able to pull all these stories together and do a monthly release of Some Good Liberty News. And our CEO would, he was sort of the mouthpiece behind it. And we would publish it in a way there where employees could comment, so we could really see how they were feeling about receiving that and engaging in the content. So that was a really positive thing for us.
That's great. And, when your leadership gets involved, it also humanizes
I have to, our leadership was amazing. I can't commend them enough in terms of how they really stepped up from the very beginning when the pandemic hit. They were there, they were visible. Aside from the enterprise-wide communications we were sending out, the leaders were then, continuing to engage and reach out to employees within their own businesses. So that throughout the entire year, which was amazing.
Yeah, and it's great that, the humanizing point of it is so important. Also, just for your employees to, understand and realize that, we all have common problems, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we all go to work, we all do the same things, but, we're all certainly still in the pandemic together.
Yes.
And these issues are common no matter who, it knows no boundaries in terms of your name, your title, your rank, or who you are. And it's almost like the I get it moment, right? It's like, look, I
Yep.
get, I know what you're going through. I feel your pain just like you. I got, maybe I'm married, maybe I've got kids, maybe I've got this situation, and you can relate to that too.
Yep.
And this is how, and maybe it's in a fun way with the storytelling and the things like that, but this is how I got through it, right? This was our therapy. This is how we did it, in a fun and engaging way. And maybe that's something you continue way beyond the pandemic as well, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, if we try to pull a silver lining out of all of this, were there any programs like this or initiatives or things that you did that are just now going to be a staple of Liberty Mutual because it happened in a pandemic and we didn't think about it until we had to think about it, but it was so good that we're going to keep it going.
Definitely. Well, the Some Good Liberty News, that's continuing on, and it's a
Yeah.
little different version from what it was before, but still it's a monthly thing that will continue. Another thing that we began working, or that we launched, I guess it was this year when it actually launched, is our own version. It's called the Great Liberty Cookbook. So what we did, we knew that over the past year, a lot of people were sharing more about themselves, like to the point you just said, people were being more open about their personal lives, partly because I think when you're in virtual meetings with people, you can literally see into their homes, into their lives. And we know that cooking and food is something that brings people together. So I wasn't responsible for this personally, but my people on my team are the Great Liberty Cookbook. So we solicited recipes from around the world and published our very first cookbook. I think we had over 850 recipes submitted. We just put out our first edition, and we had one of the ways we were promoting it was actually having some of our executives testing out the recipes in their own kitchens. So then we had the videos for employees to watch. That was actually a lot of fun.
Oh,
yeah,
that is cool.
And people were trying the recipes, and it was a really good program. So I think the cookbook will also continue in some way, shape, or form. I think they're figuring out like what is the next sort of iteration of the extension of the cookbook. So that was one fun thing.
That's great. And I can imagine the connections that probably made, like, an executive trying out, another employee's recipe.
Yeah.
And when you go back to work or something, someday maybe they can meet and actually be like, well, here's how it was supposed to taste. Or,
Exactly. Exactly. It was a lot of fun. And they just, it was so informal and fun, and people were just having a great time with it. And I don't know how other companies, I'm curious, but for us, we were in the process before the pandemic hit of retiring Skype, which we were using before, and implementing Microsoft Teams globally. Mm-hmm. So we had just started that initiative, or I should say our technology team had just started rolling that out before the pandemic hit. And there's always the worry about, okay, how are we going to get people to adopt this? There's always sort of this, or there can be a struggle with technology because, there's some people adopt things very quickly, others it takes a while. But if there was any silver lining, I think that the pandemic somewhat accelerated our adoption of Teams because it was the way everybody was engaging and communicating. So we sort of all had to jump in and start using it right away. So it became the way we were communicating and holding meetings. And that was how, we were having peeks into people's personal lives because you'd be having a video meeting and then, their child or dog or pet or whoever would be hanging out in the background or doing a cameo. So that became a lot of fun. So we had a lot of fun with Teams backgrounds, and there's a lot of neat features in Teams where you can do icebreakers and set up these like informal chats with people just to help people stay connected. So we've really been leveraging the things that are available within our technology to keep that engagement going as well.
Yeah, I you bring up a really good point. Technology obviously got fast forwarded and burner, and a lot of times when any kind of technology, I know you guys were probably working on Teams way before the pandemic, and it was already sort of in the hopper in terms of rolling it out, but it just got accelerated. there's a feeling of sort of complacency or laziness to adopt any new technology, when it gets rolled out and everybody kind of wants to stick to what they're comfortable with and what they're used to doing. The pandemic certainly, pushed everybody into that uncomfortable place of we have to do this and we have to do this now. And it's the only other way. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind. Or I literally have no way of getting in touch with people other than just directly calling them, which just isn't efficient at the end of the day. So, all types of, learning software, training software, employee engagement apps, things like that. Every company we've talked to has implemented or is in the process of, not being caught, in this situation ever again, and having the ability to communicate with their workforces no matter what, even if they get laid off, right? So even if there's a furlough or something like that, and that might be temporary, and eventually we turn the corner on the pandemic and people do come back to work. Well, I still want to keep in touch with that talent because it was good talent. I had to let it go for the financial reasons of, an unforeseen circumstance. But, hopefully when the rain stops and the sun comes out again, I want everybody to come back to work. So how do I keep in touch with them and things like that? So
exactly.
I think that's kind of like the next step of what people are starting to think about in terms of, Microsoft Teams and all that is great, but how do I continue to communicate outside of that? And that also then leads into your external brand and things, things that you might be doing in terms of, connecting the dots between employee engagement and customer engagement, right? So.
Yeah. And we actually, on the external piece, so my team, we sit in the same function as our external PR partners. So in terms of just staying in touch and closely aligned on plans, we do that just by nature of the way we're structured. Uh-huh. We have not yet, I have seen other companies where they've actually sort of, I'm using air quotes, advertised like, what their response has been. We haven't actively done that yet. I actually can't say I know if we have plans to do it in the future, but I have seen other companies do that. I think it's a really good story to tell. And I think Liberty has a great story to tell. So I would expect that we would be doing something like that, especially now that we're thinking about reopening our offices. As I mentioned to you, before we started talking here, we're now in the process of planning for our office reopening. We have had essential workers and in the office and in the field over the course of the last year, as needed based on their role. It's not large number of people, but now what we're targeting for, what we're planning for, is to hopefully open the majority of be able to open the majority of our offices after Labor Day and start bringing employees back. And we're actually beginning in July, in a lot of our offices, we're offering voluntary return for folks who might want to come in, if they're feeling like they would be more productive in the office, or they just really need to get in and get a change of scenery. Right. I don't expect the numbers to be very high, but it gives us a chance to kind of, test things out. It gives employees a chance to come back and feel some sort of normalcy, what they felt before, and then gives us time to prepare for that September return.
Sure. Yeah, and I would imagine it'll be obviously a hybrid situation, and depending on how people want to, are comfortable coming back in to the office. I hear both sides of the camp, right? So some people are like, oh no, I got to get on the commuter rail again, and I got to commute to Boston or something like, I got to travel again, and everything that goes throughout that, and that 1.5 hours or 2 hours of commute time, was more productive for me actually working from home. So I've heard those arguments and things like that. But then I've also heard, I need to get out of this house. My kids are driving me up the wall.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, and get the productivity and see people and not have to use Microsoft Teams, actually sit in the conference room and talk to somebody, face to face. And
that's, so we've actually, just in the last month, we announced like what our, again, using my air quotes, what our new normal is. And, Liberty had a pretty flexible work environment prior to the pandemic, where, there were people doing hybrid schedules. Some people were 100% work from home. Others were 100% in the office. We've learned so much over the last year in terms of, how people can be more productive at home, or, what their preference might be, whether it's in an office or at home. So now we've sort of expanded that even more. So there'll be even more flexibility for people. There are definitely still some roles that probably will be deemed more appropriate in office, but we're going to, think about how we use our offices a little differently in the future, and, maybe go in when it's really about collaboration, because for the most part, most people are very productive at home, but it will be totally a hybrid, like you just said. So a little bit here and there. And one of the things that we're talking about now is, okay, we've got some people in the office in a conference room, but 5 of those people in that meeting could be virtual. So what is that experience like? So does everyone still bring their laptop and have a Teams meeting like we would have right now, where we're all working virtually? So it's making sure that we're really being inclusive of our virtual workforce and not thinking of it like, I'm in the office, I'm virtual. It's like, we're all, how do we think about this? We're still, one workforce. We're just communicating and connecting differently. So we're trying to be really mindful of that as well.
Right. Yeah, there's all these situations that you don't know what you don't know right now. And right. I think once you get into it and you see what that experience is like, sitting in the conference room, and it's like, oh yeah, 4 of those people are virtual. Are they having the same experience? Are they getting the same impact out of this meeting versus sitting face to face? Does it make sense for us to all be virtual? Does it make sense for this meeting to just be like, no, we should all be face to face? It'll be more productive and more easier. So I think it's going to take a good 6 months to a year for us to figure out all of those bumps in the road, and then
exactly, it'll take time.
Be well prepared for whatever comes down the pike, sort of later on. So that's great. I
think at least after the pandemic, people who may not have been as open to, that keep remaining being so inclusive of people regardless of where you are, will be more open to that, like, having that experience themselves. Oh, I remember what it was like to be virtual. So, okay, now I'm in the office. I want to make that person feel included. So
sure. Yeah, that's a great point. The behaviors have certainly changed, and the expectations has definitely changed as well. So that's a great point to make. Well, this has been really, really fascinating. And, I love hearing how different companies are doing it. It sounds like you guys really weathered the storm very well at Liberty. I'm looking forward to hopefully someday seeing some of that come out into your external, because as a internal communicator, I'm always like, oh, it's such good internal stuff. Like, the whole world needs to hear about that. Like, I want to see Limu, Emu, and Todd talking about the employees. I guess Todd is the employee, right, in those ads. So,
well, he is an actor. Yeah, he's an actor.
Yeah. Where's it, Todd?
Yes, he's an actor that plays an employee. Yeah. Doug,
we will.
And we actually we know that based on our most throughout the course of the year, as I mentioned, we were doing the pulse results, and 93% of our employees reported that they were satisfied with our response to the crisis. Our leadership sentiment has improved 47% from pre-COVID to October 2020. So we were really happy with that, because it does prove that what you just said, we were doing the right thing, and people were feeling supported and safe. And that was what mattered to us the most. Well,
that's great to hear. That is great. Then the world should hear that. I'm just thinking now from the customer engagement perspective, it's like, well, there's a company I'd like to do business with, because they get it, they take care of their people, they did the right thing, when push came to shove, and took care of their kids and all that, and that stuff.
And tried to have some fun along the way.
And have some fun along the way, which is the most important part of it. Otherwise, what's the point? So that's great. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and let our audience sort of hear about Liberty Mutual's story. All you listeners out there, we will include Kathy's LinkedIn profile in the comment section below. So if you wanted to reach out to her and connect with her on LinkedIn and continue the conversation, we always encourage all us peers to stay connected and talk to each other, not just about things that might be going on inside of your company, but also as we all progress through our careers and network and things like that, it's good to make connections. So we certainly appreciate that, and we encourage that. So thanks, Kathy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I
All
hope you stay cool on this crazy heat wave we're having.
We will. This week is a crazy for all you listeners out there. This is a crazy hot week in Boston, and it was not this hot. It was cooler, and then all of a sudden it got crazy hot. But as they say in New England, if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes, right? And
So true.
it just changes that quickly.
Absolutely.
Okay, Kathy. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Hey there, employee communications and HR folks. We've got some big news to share over here at HubEngage. We've officially been made a Society of Human Resource Management recertification provider. So if you're a SHRM member and you're in need of getting your mandatory recertification credits, you can tune into our new webinar series where we educate and train you on a variety of HR-related topics and trends, so you're up to date on your continuing education requirement. SHRM is a great place for all things HR, and with this exciting new partnership HubEngage has created, we can now recertify you while you turn on engagement at the same time inside of your company. For more details and to sign up for a recertification course with one of our HubEngage SHRM certified experts, visit hubengage.com and click on the SHRM tab under resources to get started today.